Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Did you know you can advertise on podcasts?
Don't act like you're not impressed.
Find out more at podvertise.com.au. That's podvertise with an s.com.au. Ozcast.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Greats with Garby, and a man that I had on my list when I decided to embark on this podcast, pretty high up as someone I wanted to interview. He's a man who was cut from his high school basketball team in Atlanta, Georgia, that went on to be inducted into the Australian Basketball Hall of Fame. So as you can imagine, the story of how he got there promises to be a brilliant one. He had 2 stints in the NBA before the NBL came calling. He would win 2 championships with the Melbourne Tigers, a grand final MVP award in 1997, and developed one of the great Australian basketball partnerships with Andrew Gaze, en route to having his famous number 21 singlet retired by the club. He is, of course, Lanard Copeland, and he's with me now. Lanard, hello to you. Thanks for jumping on board.
Daniel, good to be here. How are you?
I'm really well, and you look really well too. You look fit and in a good way. Is that an accurate assessment?
I wouldn't say in a great way. I'm in Melbourne. We're in lockdown, so I'm just doing the best that I can in a tough situation. Believe that.
You know, despite the fact that you're in lockdown there, I must say it's always great when an import that comes across to Australia to play some basketball ends up calling Australia home. I mean, you moved here in 1992 and you're still here. I mean, do you ever reflect on that and can you believe that?
I reflect on it all the time. In fact, I just got an email or a Facebook ad from a girl that I was supposedly dating in college, which is 31 years ago. Okay, now imagine this. 31 years ago, someone hits me the other day and goes, "Hi, do you remember me?" I said, not really. And so she went through the whole story, but it's been a long time, man. I mean, I reflect on being here and being here this long and missing all the things I miss in America. You know, there's little things that I miss, like going to a grocery store and having 3 aisles of cereal and the variety of different restaurants, you know, in my neighborhood and family, obviously, you know, cousins and family reunions and that kind of thing is the most, you know, the biggest thing that you miss. But, you know, the trade-off has been fantastic because Australia's been great to me. You know, I've met a lot of lifelong friends and had a pretty good career here. So, you know, I'm happy that if I had to go anywhere, Australia was probably the best place to go.
Apart from, you know, falling in love with the country for obvious reasons, why have you stayed? Why didn't you go back? Was it an obvious thing or were there reasons for it?
Well, 92, we got here. I got here in 92 after playing a couple of years in the NBA. And when you say playing, I wasn't really playing. I was sitting on the bench, 12 player, which is phenomenal for most people, being on an NBA team. But I wanted to play because I didn't get a chance to play in high school, and then to play 4 years of college. I had that fire. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn the game. I was eager about playing. I wanted to be on the floor. And I wasn't good enough. I mean, you had Charles Barkley and Rick Mahorn and Scotty Brooks, who's coaching, and Hershey Hawkins and Johnny Dawkins, who's coaching college. Those guys were the guys that were playing a lot of time, and I was learning the game, but I needed to play. So when I got here in 92, we went straight to the championship, you know, and lost in that third game against the Magic. And I felt like, yeah, you know, as good as the money is and as good as the fame is in the NBA, I'm not guaranteed to get on a roster spot. I'm not guaranteed to play. But if I stay here, I am guaranteed to be playing. And so I decided to hang around for a little while. Hang around forever, I guess.
And we're happy to have you here. And you've been doing some coaching as well since you retired. We're going to go through your whole playing career, of course. But you've done a fair bit of coaching. You were with Andrew Gaze at the Sydney Kings. Is that what you're still involved in more than anything else at the moment, coaching the game you love?
Well, yeah, I am. But I'm coaching kids. the game has changed so much. But as a player, an ex-player, you always want to give back. You always want to teach people the things you've learned that'll help you along the way. It's a fantastic game. You know, I've had nothing but great things happen to me. So you see a young kid who's struggling to shoot the ball or struggling with ball handling. You know, you want to give them an easier way to learn and a better way to learn. So I'm coaching kids right now, but I'm staying involved in the game. Absolutely.
Great to hear. So you're born in Atlanta, Georgia, Lanard. Was basketball the be-all and end-all for you in life from as young as you can remember?
No. I was a sportsman. I played football. Football was my number one sport. I loved football, but I was a skinny, short kid. I was short and skinny, but I was fast. And I played football, and I played baseball, softball. I ran track. I had a skateboard as a young kid, and we lived on top of a hill. And I swear I used to ride that skateboard down the hill every day. And then I'd ride it back up the hill. I'd push it back up the hill. And I think overall that helped me with my athletic ability, to help me jump the way I jump. But, you know, and basketball was a sport I wanted to play as well, but I wasn't really a tall guy. I only grew the summer of my senior year in high school is when I shot up about 6 inches, and I started really loving the game then.
So you missed out on your high school team. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense now that you only shot up in your senior year, but you know, it's almost a Michael Jordan type story. He missed out on his high school team. Okay, you didn't become MJ, but you had a damn good basketball career at the top level, and yet you weren't good enough for your high school team. Can you remember what that was like?
Yeah, I wasn't good enough. The bottom line, and like I used to go back in the summer and I'd see the coach, and my brother would always go, "This guy made the NBA and you wouldn't sign him." And I'd always say to my brother, I wasn't good enough for that team. That team, like my high school team, was very good. They made the playoffs both years I tried out. I think one year they went very far. They had some talented players. No one in high school knew I loved the game. I mean, I tried out for the team, but it wasn't like everyone goes, "Lanard's a basketball player." I was just a normal kid, that loved sport. I ended up playing football because in my household, I had 2 other brothers and 3 sisters, and we all went to the same high school. My mom and dad went to the same high school. And in our house, we had a big mantelpiece, and there were trophies everywhere. Like my brothers played football and basketball, and my other brother was a great football player. And my sister ran track, and one sister was a cheerleader. So there were medals and, ribbons everywhere. And my brother used to tease me and say, "When are you going to put something on the mantelpiece?" Whenever we had Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. So I played football, ended up playing football my senior year, and I ran track my senior year. And I was lettered in that. But basketball, once I sort of started growing and getting the question, "Do you play basketball? Do you play basketball?" I just started learning the game a little bit more and playing after school every day. And it just became one of those things where me and a couple of friends was doing it. We'd leave school after school, walk by the park, put our books down, play 3 or 4 hours, and then I'd go home, and it just became something I loved.
So even though you weren't good enough at the time of the team being selected, do you ever reflect with some of the guys you went to high school with and say to them, "I wasn't good enough for the high school basketball team, but here I am having a 20-odd year career in professional leagues"? Does that conversation ever come up?
They bring it up more than I do. They bring it up more than how, like the guys that I was running with never knew I was a basketball player, and I sort of didn't know myself. But then to go, I got a job after high school with about 7 guys. We started working at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as paper rollers, like the big rolls of paper that the newspaper comes out in. We used to roll the paper, and I remember we all worked together. We all had the blue uniforms because I never knew. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do after high school, and we were sort of all in the same boat there. My mom wanted me to go to college. I said, maybe I'll take a year off. I don't know. And I remember wearing this blue suit, and it had my name, and it had Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Now, we would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we worked from 9 to 5, okay? But there was a group before us who were all older gentlemen, and they were doing the night shift. So when they came in at 7:30 in the locker room to change, I remember sitting there getting changed, and there was this old gray guy with the same uniform on. He had his name, and he had the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and he had been there for 30, 40 years. And I said, and it was almost like somebody tapped me and said, do you want to be doing this for the next 40 years? Yeah, well. And I said, no. And this is the God's honest truth. That day, the day that guy sat next to me, I walked into my boss's office. His name was Fan. I walked into Fan's office and said, Fan, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I think I want to go to school. I quit that day. I didn't even go to my shift. I quit that day and didn't even tell my friends. I just said enough is enough. I still had no idea what I was going to do, but I went home, talked to my mom and my sister, and they said, why don't you just go back to school? So I went to Georgia State University, which was in Atlanta. Unbelievable. What a story. And you make the basketball team and play there for 4 years. So how did it go from just saying, all right, I'm going to school, to making the team and being a crunch player on the roster of a big basketball team in the college system? Well, I was walking through campus, and obviously I knew the campus was there, and I was walking through the campus, and I went through the gym, and there was one of the coaches. We had a third floor gym, nice new facility, and then the fourth floor was a track that went around the gym, and the coach, one of the coaches, new coaches, who was a scout for the Atlanta Hawks, and he was also a big name coach for one of the high schools there. He said to me, he yelled out, he goes, we're having tryouts in about 3 weeks or 2 weeks or something. And they had a big poster on the door when tryouts was. And I said to myself, what do I have to lose? I mean, by that time, it was a year and a half where I loved playing the game. I started to grow a little bit. Got nothing to lose. It was Division I school, though, which scared me. And you don't walk onto a Division I school. You rarely walk onto a Division I school. So there was one scholarship left, and there was 31 guys that tried out for that one scholarship. And it was my day, because I just remember in that tryout, I just remember having one of the best tryouts ever. I had 3 or 4 dunks, I was shooting the ball well. Everything I put up went in. And the coach was sitting there. He was actually sitting on the floor, and I walked past, and he goes, "We'll see you tomorrow, training at 3:00." So I thought, me not knowing anything about being on a team, that was the first team I'd been on as far as basketball. I thought maybe, he wants me to work out again or whatever. And then after sitting down with him, they said, "Look, we got one scholarship left. We're not going to give it to you straight away. You got to earn it. You got to come to practice. You got to work hard." And midway through the season, they gave me a 4-year deal. So that my mom and dad loved that, because they didn't have to pay for school. I had room and board. I had books paid for, and I'm going to a Division I school, and all of a sudden I'm on a roster. So it was an amazing story. Yeah. It's an incredible story, mind blowing that you'd never been on a proper basketball team, and yet you're recruited by a Division I school not long after, and you're there for 4 years, and you're a crucial player on that team. I've never had the privilege of going to college in America, Lanard, and certainly not being a college athlete. Lots of people haven't. How good is college life when you're a star athlete? It's better for me because I was in Atlanta, but most Division I schools have a football team. Even now, Georgia State has one now, but back then we didn't have a football team. It was basketball. Basketball was the show. So my first year, I didn't get a chance to play a lot, but I roomed with my roommate was the starting point guard. So I got to pick his brain. He'd tell me every day, come to practice, do this, do that. And he was a pretty good player. He'd tell me what to do and what not to do. But then, fortunately enough, or unfortunately, we recruited 2 or 3 guys from major schools, Florida State, and we got a guy from Clemson, the rookie of the year in Clemson, and we got a guy from Florida State who had sort of left the school to come back to play for the coach. And they were big-time players, so we got a lot of publicity. A lot of Channel 2 and Channel 5 and Channel 11 news were at our trainings to see these guys come in. And they both went down with injury, and they were both in my position. So my first year, I didn't play a lot. The second year, I got a chance to play a little bit. I averaged 7, 8 points a game. In the second year, my third year went to 12, and in my fourth year, I was 15 points a game. And to average that many in a Division I school, you're going to have some scouts looking at you. So, but the college scene was crazy, because if you've never been to a college basketball game or a campus or parties every night, man. We had it flowing. So it was very fun. It was fun for me. It was something new, but it was very fun.
Is it almost hard to stay focused on the basketball when all that's going on? Because I can imagine it's the ultimate life, right?
Let me tell you, my roommate, the guy that I roomed with, rest in peace, he passed away, but he flunked out of school. Like he was a superstar. He didn't make his grades, and he flunked out. So we also had the first Division I deaf player. So we all had to learn sign language, and he was my roommate, Willie Brown. And he transferred over, and so the team had to learn sign language, and he was my roommate. So I had Paris Dennis and Willie Brown, my roommates, and Paris flunked out because I can honestly say we partied a lot in college because it was just, that's it. You play ball, you go to school, and there's parties, sorority and fraternity parties every night. So when we lived off campus in an apartment, but all the sports people lived in the same apartment complex, the tennis players, the swimmers, the basketball players, the track and field. So we were always in that party atmosphere.
What a life, the stuff of dreams. Hey, what's happened to Willie Brown, the deaf player in your team?
Willie Brown is gone. I think he's. I haven't heard from Willie in about 10, 12 years, but I know he was coaching he was helping out with a deaf school somewhere.
Great.
I think it was in Connecticut somewhere. So I haven't really spoken with him, but it was fun to learn. In fact, when I got here, I did some stuff in the early 90s with a deaf school, but the deaf language here is a little bit different than the one in the States. So I wasn't great with it, but I learned the alphabets and I learned key words to get me through, and Willie could read lips as well. So it was really good for me to experience that.
Unbelievable. So you go from, the stuff of dreams, college basketball, 4 years of that, this can't get any better. I don't want this to stop, to reality, and applying for the NBA draft in 1989, but not getting picked up. Coincidentally, another player in that draft who was overlooked went by the name of A. Gaze. So amazing you were both in that same draft, you and Andrew Gaze, and then you would be intertwined years later. But were you devastated? Did you have high expectations of being picked up? What transpired in terms of your mind?
I didn't apply for the draft. I mean, what happened was, my senior year, I had a couple of pretty good games, and so I got a scout come down to watch me from the LA Lakers. And we played in a tournament in California, Irvine, and I think I made first team tournament. And Scotty Brooks I think Scotty Brooks might have played in that tournament, and a couple of big name guys played. We played against Maryland. And Maryland had a couple of big name guys that played, and Mashburn and some of those guys, and I made first team. And so the scouts started to come watch me play. And luckily enough, I was consistent enough to average about 15 points a game, and the scout told me, he said, listen, we want to invite you to rookie camp in LA. He said, we like what you can do. You're wiry. You remind us of Michael Cooper, who played for the Lakers. Same sort of body build, same wiry body. Yep. We want to bring you in and see how it goes. Now, I was excited about it, but I've come to find out most teams bring in about 25 guys, bring in about 20 guys for every rookie camp. And then if you're good enough, they invite you back to veterans camp. Well, this year, the Lakers brought in 2 teams. And for some strange reason, they wanted to coach 2 teams. They were the only team and we played at Loyola Marymount, and I was on the second team. And so I'm here. Here's a guy from Georgia State, a school not really known for basketball, but we're going to give him a shot. And we ended up playing the San Antonio Spurs, and it was the first year that Dave Robinson had come out of the academy. All right, so Dave Robinson ended up playing in those games, the summer league, because he wanted to get familiar with his team. And back then, Dave Robinson coming out of that academy was massive news. It was huge news. So our game was packed to the rafters. Like, there was standing room only. So I'm warming up. I'm just happy to see. I'm happy to see Dave Robinson because I'd heard about him on the news. And geez, he's a big boy. He's a pretty big boy. So again, luck was with me, but I got to that game and I absolutely shot up his side of the ball. I scored 30-plus points in that game. I think we ended up losing, but I scored 30 points. I shot the ball extremely well. I didn't know what the stats were, but I was 5 for 7 from the three-point line, and everything I shot was going in. I had my mojo that game. And I do remember somebody shot the ball, and the ball came off the rim, and Dave went up to get it, but I jumped over his back and dunked it, and the crowd went crazy. Anytime anybody gets dunked on, the crowd's going to go nuts. And that was one game where I think people started to notice me.
Okay.
And then we ended up playing one more game. I ended up playing one more game because they tell you to pack for 30 days because you're going to end up playing about eight or 10 games in the preseason. So I told you pack for 30 days. I ended up playing against the Philadelphia 76ers the next day, and I ended up with about 30 more points, still shooting the ball well. I love the gym. The rims were great for me. And I was in the shower, and the owner and the coach knocked on the door, and one of the guys said, "Copeland, someone wants to talk to you." So I wrapped myself in a towel and went to the door, not knowing who anybody was. I had no idea. Harold Katz was the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, and Jimmy Lanard was the head coach, and they were both standing at the door. And they said, "When you dry off, come outside." And I came outside, and they said, "Listen, we want to invite you to our veterans camp." Now, I had no idea about veterans camp and rookie camp and how that worked. And I said, "Okay, well, let me talk to my coach." I said, "Let me talk to my coach." And they said, "It's probably not a great idea." I said, "I want to call my college coach because he knows more about it." And I got on the phone and I called Bob Reinhardt, who's my college coach, and I said, "Coach, listen, I got a dilemma." I said, "I'm playing with the Lakers, but Philadelphia want me to come to veterans camp." He goes, "What? Wait a minute. What do you mean?" I said, "I played quite well, and Philadelphia invited me," and I told him a story. And then he said, "Well, listen, I got to get you an agent. You can't do anything by yourself. You can't sign any contract by yourself." So he knew someone in L.A. Agent came to meet me that next night. The agent negotiated, talked to L.A., and they talked to Philly. Philly offered me a partial contract to come to veterans camp. So Magic, Kareem, Michael Cooper, they had Byron Scott, they had all these big names. So I'm excited about that. And then Philadelphia goes, "Well, we'll just give you the whole guaranteed contract to come to Philly."
Yeah, wow.
And I jumped on it straight away, and I was in Philly before you knew it. And I ended up playing 2 games. The owner came to my hotel room. He reached in his pocket and gave me about $800. He goes, "Go buy you a steak dinner." He goes, I'll see you in about 20 days or 30 days at veterans camp." And I jumped on a plane the next day and I flew home. And ironically enough, the people in Atlanta had heard about it, and the same newspaper that I worked for, when I flew in, my picture was on the back page of that newspaper. So I had friends working at the newspaper plant that seen me go through that little circle of playing ball. Working there. Now I'm going to be a basketball player. It was crazy. So, yeah, it was all meant to be, I guess.
All those years after walking out saying, "I don't want to do this anymore," and then you're on the front page because you've signed with the Philadelphia 76ers. An incredible story. So you played 23 games for Philly. The thrill of playing in the NBA, even though it came so quickly, how did you counter those emotions with the pressure of trying to hang on to a spot, which is so difficult to do, of course?
I wasn't mature enough. You got to understand, I didn't grow up with the game. I didn't play high school basketball. I played 4 years, and bam, I'm on an NBA roster. So I didn't realize I had to work extra hard. I didn't realize when the veteran guys walked off the floor, I had to stay on the floor and get my shots up. I wasn't, my brain wasn't there yet. But then after Scotty Brooks, I gotta admit, Scotty Brooks was one of the hardest workers I've ever met. And he used to tell me, "Look, let's get in 100, 200 shots after training." And so it started to come, but Philadelphia were at that stage where they wanted a championship and they were looking for a championship. So they were making trades and making moves. And I ended up playing those 32 games for Philadelphia, just sparingly. But my mindset wasn't right. And so they got there sort of when I got past the Clippers and got to Australia. I knew I had to work hard and whatever. But those experiences were fantastic. I mean, here I am. My best friend was Charles Barkley and Rick Mahorn, because most times veteran guys look after the rookies, and I was the gopher. Whenever they needed something, I had to go get it, or whatever. They tip well, but it is, it is what it is. It's a part of being in that fraternity. And those guys were amazing, man. I mean, I hung with them all the time. They were my boys, and so it was something that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Amazing,
yeah. So a young Charles Barkley is there and dominating from straight away. I'm pretty sure he was all NBA first team the season you were there at Philly. We know what he's like as a character. I mean, we see him now as an analyst. He's hilarious. He was larger than life as a player, and from an Australian point of view, we all remember that run-in with Shane Heal, which will last until the end of days in terms of Australian sport as a story to remember. So what was he like back then, Charles Barkley, obviously in addition to him being a fantastic player?
He was loud and brag. He was arrogant. But one thing about Charles, he always spoke the truth, though. Like, if Charles messed up, Charles would say, "My bad, I messed up." But if you messed up, he's going to tell you that too. And Charles Charles wanted to win more than anything. He's watching Michael, Jordan get his, and he's watching all these guys win championships, and he didn't have any, because the year I was with the Sixers, we won the Atlantic Division. So our first round, we had to play the Chicago Bulls, and that's the first year Michael won his championship. Now, Charles was disappointed that we got knocked out in that first round. But Charles was one of those guys, man. He'd give you the shirt off his back. He was a great friend, but he always spoke his mind. He had run-ins with the owner because we didn't have our own plane. Like we chartered a plane, but every other team in the NBA had their own plane, and we didn't have one. And Charles wanted that plane because after games, most teams would fly out that night and fly to another destination. Sometimes we'd have to wake up the next morning and do that. But there was always little issues, with Charles, and he expected you to be perfect, but he worked hard himself. So I understand where he was.
So you had a courtside seat, obviously, for Michael Jordan winning his first championship. I mean, what was it like? Were you involved in that?
I was there. I was certainly there.
What was it like watching MJ close up, as the legend is starting to grow?
Well, people ask me why I picked Jordan over LeBron as the GOAT, because I got a chance to see Jordan do his thing. And it was, again, like watching a ghost, man. There was times when Jordan would make a move and dunk on us, and I'd be on the bench going, that kind of thing, grabbing my face or excited because I'm a basketball player now. Knowing you can't do that because I'm the opposition. But he was just so much better than everybody else. We had Hershey Hawkins guard him. We had Charles Barkley guard him. We had Ron Anderson guard him. We threw the kitchen sink at him, and he was unstoppable. And the one thing that Jordan leaves me with is he made the game look so very easy because he enjoyed what he was doing, and he didn't rush. He didn't look like he was ever rushed. I don't care if you threw 2 or 3 people at him. He'd swing the ball and go here and get it. He'd swing it and go there and get it, and he always had enough time to get his shot off. So, he was one of those guys that I will always cherish being on the opposition bench watching Jordan do his thing because he was the best I've ever seen.
Unbelievable. So, you've explained pretty well why it didn't quite work for you at Philly. You were a late bloomer, so to speak, but you got another chance with the LA Clippers that lasted 3 months. Had you matured by then? Did you know what you needed to do by then? And why didn't it work out there? Was it just...
Yeah, unlucky. I can tell you what happened. I mean, I thought I was going to be in the rotation in LA because I went to LA. There's something about LA. I got to training camp with the Clippers because I went to Atlanta to a training camp, and they released me. They had Doc Rivers and John Battle and Spud Webb and all these guys, so they were set. But I was from Atlanta, so I said I might as well just try out with them. Didn't work out, so I went to LA, got a run, and absolutely played extremely well Ron Harper was the two-man there. Gary Grant was a point guard, and they had Lloyd Vault. They had Danny Manning.
Yep.
And James Edwards from the Detroit Pistons. He was our starting five. So I remember Ken Norman, who was the starting three-man there, and he said to me, he said, if you pass the ball one time, you might make this team, which meant every time I touched the ball, I got it up. And fortunately enough, when I got it up, it went in. Now, admittedly, Ron Harper was coming off knee surgery, so he was just coming back. And Ron Harper will tell you himself, I had a very good camp against Ron Harper. Now, I took advantage of him being a bit slower, a step slower, but I was just trying to make a team. And I made the team. And I was in the rotation. And I got a chance to play. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, Larry Johnson had just come in for the Charlotte Hornets. They call him Grandmama. He did a commercial with the wig and the glasses or whatever and the dress, and he had a couple of dunks. And I got a chance to play in this game, and it was at the end of the game, and we were up by 10 or 11, and somebody kicked me the ball up the floor. And Larry Johnson was standing under the ring like this, as if to say, you're never going to dunk on me, because he was pretty strong. He was a Charles Barkley. He was a pretty big guy. Man, I took off. I believe I took off. Felt like I took off from half court, and I threw him in the rim. This is one of my hardest dunks, and I still can't find that on tape, so on film. Somebody find that, please, for me. Hardest dunk ever, and I came down and twisted my knee. And I knew it was a great dunk because in the NBA, after every game, sponsors give you a prize for player of the game or whatever. I only played 10 minutes that game or whatever, and I got that prize. I got a gold necklace because everyone went nuts. Everyone went nuts over that dunk. I remember him wanting to. He was pissed off about it, and Ron Harper and those guys were with me, hugging my neck, and they're all happy about it. But I was really focused on playing in this. I said, I'm going to be here for a while. And what happened was I went to the locker room, and I came to practice the next day, and I didn't train. And one of the assistant coaches said, come here, let me talk to you. We're going to put you on injured reserve because we love what you can do. We're going to put you on injured reserve, and hopefully you come back soon. So guess what? I said, okay. I go to the locker room to make a phone call to call my agent to say they're going to put me on injured reserve. I make the phone call. Remember, we didn't have cell phones back then, so it was a rotary. I call my agent. Look, they're gonna put me on injured reserve. Great. I walk back out of the locker room. That head coach grabs me. He said, we just got word we're not allowed to put you on injured reserve because we have 4 or 5 guys on injured reserve already, and the league is cracking down. We can't put any more guys on injured reserve. And they released me that day. So I went from highs to lows in a matter of 5 minutes, made that call, got on a plane, got back to Atlanta, rehabbed. I think I ended up playing a year in the CBA or something and went to the Philippines and then got over there and just didn't look back, just shot everything I touched to get myself back in shape or whatever. So that's where we were.
And then the call comes. So the call comes to go to Australia and the Melbourne Tigers. How did that all transpire, and what were you thinking at the time about the invitation and the chance to embark on a career of basketball down under?
Well, without sounding arrogant, I had no idea where Australia was. You understand, there was no social media back then, okay? There was no Instagram or Facebook. I couldn't see photos of Australia, all right? And when I got to the Philippines, Dwayne McClain was there.
Of course.
And Dwayne had just...
What a baller.
Yeah, Dwayne had just signed a contract. I remember playing in a game. We had 2 games on a Sunday at the Ultra in the Philippines. So I played first, and then Dwayne played after me. He was on another team. And that one game, I had 66 points, and Dwayne was sitting there. And I came off the floor, like, I was pointing at him like, yeah, you see that? Did you see what just happened? And Dwayne gave me a high five, and I went into the shower. And I came back out to watch his game because I met Dwayne a week before that or something. And all the Americans hung together in the Philippines. We all stayed in the same big building, but we were on different teams. We all had drivers and cooks or whatever. And I came back out, to watch Dwayne, and Dwayne ended up having 72 points his game. And he came off and gave me a wink. He said, "Did you see that?" I said, "Yes, I like this guy. So I said, and I was thinking to myself, he's going to make me better because if he's going to get 72, I got to get 75 the next game. Forget that." That's how I was thinking. So, nothing to do in the Philippines but work on your game, man. It was hot. And I got in great shape, and I was the only import on the team, so they want you to shoot the ball every time. So I worked on my shot and got myself solid. And my agent said, "Listen, there's a couple of jobs, one in Greece, one in Australia. No, I think there's one in France somewhere. Like, I really don't want to go anywhere where they don't speak English. I want to go somewhere where they speak English." And Dwayne said, "Listen, Australia's nice. I've been there. We travel. I traveled with Kareem, went over to some practice. We had a couple of practice games over in Australia. I love it there. It's a nice place. You'll love it." And I told my agent, "Look, Australia, it could be Australia, and let's see what happens." And then, I flew to Australia after flying for 200 hours, not knowing where the hell I was going. There was no direct flights, bro. So I jumped on and off and on and off and on and off. And I finally got here. I was jet lagged, drunk. And, the rest is history. I've been here for 31 years. So, yeah.
Incredible. I love that story from the Philippines with Dwayne McClain, because every Sydney Kings fan and NBL fan will remember Dwayne McClain and Leon Trimmingham. That was the combination for about a season or so. And they were just beyond electric. And that got the whole ball rolling in regards to imports.
Dwayne was a great player. Dwayne made me the player I am, because when he scored, if you go back right now in history and look at every game the Sydney Kings played the Melbourne Tigers, if it's 10 games, I can promise you 8 of them, Dwayne would have scored 40, I would have scored 40, or it would have been close. Because every time he scored, I had to score, man. It was like that. If I got 38, Dwayne had 36. So we always pushed each other, but we were best friends, man. We were best friends. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So what are your impressions then of Australian basketball when you eventually arrive in the NBL and this team that you've joined where the father is the coach of the star player?
Well, I had the same situation in college. The head coach had a son who played point guard as well, so sort of knew. But I wasn't thinking like that. When I got here, Andrew was in Greece, I think, or he was overseas. So I landed and got to training the first day. And what happened was I landed early, about 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Came in, they picked me up. I went to a hotel. Met the general manager, had something to eat, and went upstairs to lay down because, again, I told you I came from L.A., Atlanta, Texas, L.A., Hawaii, New Zealand, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, something like that. Crazy. I just know it took me forever, and I thought I must be going to the moon here. Where am I going? I finally got there. I laid down because I was so tired, man. And I remember it was almost, how you felt that jet lag feel.
Oh, yeah.
It was almost as if I just laid my head down and I hear somebody knocking at the door. And it was Ward Giddy. And he said, "Mate, I'm here to pick you up. We have training." And I said, "Give me a minute." What? Eyes red. I'm stuttering. I can't. It's almost like I'm walking on air. I can't feel my legs. And we get to Albert Park. I don't know if you've ever been to Albert Park, the old Albert Park. Jesus. Possum shit everywhere and orange chairs, and the rings are 9 feet, and the floor, the backboards are plastic. And I'm thinking, I've left the LA Clippers for this shit. Oh, no, I'm in trouble. And I got there, and we had training and trying to learn first and thirds. I don't care who you are, bro. Let me tell you something. First and thirds was our offense. Lindsay had it down packed, but for a jet lag guy trying to learn that on the first day, blew my mind. He just let us play. And Dean Vickerman, who's the head coach now of Melbourne United, was playing point guard for the other team, and I was guarding him, and Dean tore me a new one. Dean gave me 30 points that game. And they thought this guy's defense is just terrible. And in fact, Lindsay said they were looking for a bigger guy. They wanted a 3-4. I was more of a 1-2, big guard, but they wanted a 3-man or 4-man. And he goes, and in fact, Al Westover says all the time, we were thinking about cutting you, bro.
Wow.
I said, dude, well, it is what it is, I've been cut before, but luckily everything worked out, and after I got my legs under me, there was a tournament, Kmart Classic, and by that time, Andrew had come back.
Yep. And
we sort of bonded a little bit in practice. He knew I could jump, and he would toss the ball up, and I knew he could shoot, and I thought I was a pretty good shooter as well, so I figured we'd be pretty good. Dave Simmons, Ben Simmons' father, was there, and we had some Robert Sibley. We had some pretty good talent, so we put all that together and we did quite well,
The relationship with Andrew was an incredible one. I mean, it was just a special bit of on-court chemistry. The alley-oop aspect to it. So obviously you realize you've got this thing going. Did you say to yourself, as this is becoming a phenomenon of the league, we need to do it more because of the hype or purely because it was just such a good offensive threat? Did you just think, let's get into Showtime mode here because everyone's loving this. Let's try to do it as much as we can?
Well, it was our first year at Rod Laver. So we had 15,000, whenever we played against Melbourne Magic or North Melbourne or Geelong, we always fill that place up. But I'm learning now, I'm just learning that was Dave Simmons' play. Apparently, I heard Warren Giddy do a podcast about 2 weeks ago, and he goes, Lanard Copeland came in and stole Dave's alley-oop. Man, all I did was jump one day, and Andrew threw the ball up. I have no claims on anything. It's not my play. It's not Dave Simmons' play. But because teams couldn't stop it, because if I'm on a wing, if I came over the top, it was a pass for a jump shot. Now I was good enough to knock that shot down. So players had to go over the top of that screen, because if they went under the screen, I'm knocking the shot down. So whenever a player went over the top, I would go back door, and there's nobody back door. And Andrew was good enough to throw it, and back then I was good enough to go get it. So it just worked for us. I mean, we had two weapons in one. Either I'm going to make the shot, or I'm gonna catch the alley-oop. And fortunate enough, I was good enough again to make that shot because they wouldn't have went over the top. You know what I mean? So. Yeah, it worked for us, and we just decided, and whenever it happened, it would give our fans a roar, and they went nuts. The opposition hated it. We do it as much as we could, and we had way more success than no success. So I think it was good for both of us.
Well, I can attest to that because in 1993, I was 10 years old, and I was there in Perth, man, as a young fan, passionate as ever about the Wildcats and confident as you are as a 10-year-old kid. Your team's won a championship. You just think you're going to win. It's game 3 in Perth, and at 10 years old, you're naive. You just think you're going to win. You don't think about heartbreak. And look, my heart was broken as a fan there as Andrew Vlahov's shot on the buzzer goes in and out, and the Tigers win their first ever championship. I mean, the emotion of that, Lanard and Andrew cutting the net and the embrace with his father, all of those things entailed. I mean, how special is it now to reflect on?
It's great because, you think about those times, when I'm retired and go back and you think about the best times of your basketball career, and certainly one of the best, because no one expected for us to win it except us and some of our fans. Because you got to understand, the Melbourne Tigers had never won in Perth. That's a long trip. And I do remember saying that in practice, our last training session in Melbourne. I said, fellas, this is a long trip to be going way over there to lose. I remember saying it like it was yesterday. And I remember Scotty Fisher. I remember going over that first game. Like, we blew them out here. We had a great, we got into them here because we had 15,000 of our own fans. And usually when you play at Rod Laver and get 15,000, half are Magic fans, half are Melbourne Tiger fans, or half are the Giants and Melbourne Tigers. But this time we had 15,000 of our own fans, and we had a very good game. And I remember saying, how can we beat these guys by this many points here and not go over there and be competitive, and I guess it must have resonated because guys started listening, and we got there at second game, and they didn't kill the beats by 7 points or 6 points, I think. So we were always in the game. And I do remember back then being in the room that morning of the game, waking up early, like 5 o'clock because the timing was bad for me. Getting up early, and I remember wearing a Melbourne Tigers tracksuit, and I went downstairs for a long walk by myself. I grabbed the newspaper. Newspaper had Wildcats from front to back. Everything was about the Wildcats, and everyone was talking about this, and everybody was talking about that. And I just said to myself, I just lost the championship the year before. I got to do something. I mean, I wasn't thinking I'm going to go out there and score a lot of points, but we got to make sure we do something because this is a long trip. I kept thinking about the long trip back. and I remember right before we were called out, you could see the Wildcats locker room, and I seen at that stadium, I seen some of the waiters taking champagne to the door of their locker room with ice.
Wow.
And I remember looking in the roof, and there were balloons everywhere. They had a big net. And there were balloons everywhere.
I remember that. I was there.
And I remember Scotty Fisher, he always used to slide on the floor after a win. He'd always slide on the floor and do his little thing. And they had him doing that on the news the night before, and he was all excited about it, and we're going to win. And I said, I can't go with 2 losses, bro, in 2 years in a row. I can't do it. So, that game was one of those games where it was back and forth. And I remember Lindsay pulling me to the side and said, look, I need you to go at Ricky, man. Go at him. Me and Ricky had history in college.
Okay.
He said, listen, go at Ricky, man. Go at him. Ricky got his 4th foul. And I said, yep, Ricky, you're in trouble, bro. You're in trouble. I got to do it. And then, fortunate enough, everything I put up in that third quarter fell. And I remember whatever didn't go in, Mark Barkley grabbed the rebound and kicked it back out. He was a beast on the boards. He was a beast. And Dave Simmons and those guys were, they weren't hearing it, man. And, they were the enforcers. Like Vlahoff was an enforcer. James Crawford was a big-time dunker. And Scotty Fisher was big and strong. And whenever you came through the middle, somebody was going to pop you. Well, Dave was doing that with Ricky. And I said, somebody got to put the wood on him because he's good. I mean, Ricky was very good. It's hard to guard. I'm 6'6", and Rick's 5'11". It's hard to guard the little quick guy with his left-handed. Somebody's got to put him on his ass. And fortunate enough, Robert Sibley and Giddy and those guys, they put him down a couple of times, and he got into foul trouble, and I went at it. So, yeah.
And the rest is history. Amazing. So, I mean, Ricky Grace was, as a Perth fan, I mean, he was the ultimate, right? We loved him. We had so many stars, but he was just the creme de la creme. And there were so many other big-name imports and guards at that time. Darryl McDonald, Derek Rucker, Shane Heal from an Aussie point of view, Robert Rose. Tell us about the relationship you had with Ricky, considering you battled at college, as you said before, and who did you enjoy dueling with the most during those times?
Ricky was, I only got a chance to play with Ricky once in college. We had a game against Oklahoma, and he had Stacey King, who was an ex-Chicago Bulls. He had Horace Grant, who also NBA. He had Mookie Blaylock, who was also NBA, and Ricky, and they beat the living crap out of us. Like we went, it was cold. I remember snowing. We played Oklahoma and Nebraska, and I remember just being snow everywhere. We got there and we couldn't get the ball off the floor because Ricky and Mookie Blaylock were the 2 best guards in college basketball. And whenever we tried to get the ball across the floor, they were pressing and stealing the ball. And the score ended up being 60-100. They beat us by 40 points. And I remember my coach telling one of our young players to go tell their coach to call the dogs off. Now, that is the most humiliating thing in the world as a basketball player if you're competitive. And I was competitive as most. I didn't know Ricky, but I remember Ricky just rubbing it in, and he did what he was supposed to do. They beat the living crap out of us. But I said to myself, something about that guy, I don't like him because he's being a little bit too arrogant about it. I'm going to see him again. And lo and behold, I think it was my first game in Australia, or second game in Australia, on the road. We ended up playing Perth. And I said, that's that guy. And we got into a little scuffle. I think I ended up swinging at him and scraping him on the face or in the nose. Wow. And Andrew grabbed me and goes, oh, hey, you can't do that. You can't do that. They'll suspend you over here. And so we always went at it. And most Americans, after a game, I'd hang out with Mark Davis or I'd hang out with Derek Rucker or I'd hang out with Me and Dwayne hung out after every game. Never, ever, ever did I hang out with Ricky, ever. But now me and Ricky I speak to Ricky once a month. Me and Ricky I go to Perth, first person I call is Ricky. Ricky will come by and pick me up. I stay at Ricky's house. So right now, me and Ricky are very good friends. I got the utmost respect. We're in Sydney, me and Andrew in Sydney we're coaching, and Ricky had some kind of ceremony in Sydney, and he invited me and Andrew to come. And so that's the relationship we have now. But when we played, I couldn't stand the ground. He walked on, and he couldn't stand the ground. I walked on. But it made both of us better, though.
What a great story. What a great rivalry. I mean, speaking of great players, though, I mean, there was no one better than Andrew Gaze in Australian basketball during that decade of the 90s. I mean, you speak about going to watch those games. I would sit behind one of the backboards, and like any 10-year-old kid would do, I mean, we would just boo with every single sinew in our body to try and put off the shooter. With Andrew Gaze, we didn't even bother, right, when he's shooting free throws, because it always goes in. Even as a 10-year-old kid, I'm like, just save your energy for him. I mean, I've spoken to Shane Heal about how good he was on an earlier episode, and listen to that because it's really interesting, but I'm really keen for your perspective as his teammate for so long. What made him so good, and how big of a shame is it that he didn't get enough of a crack at the NBA when he was at his absolute peak? He got it later, of course.
His work ethic was above any I've ever seen, and the reason for that is because, again, his father, they lived in the house was in between the basketball stadium and the tennis court or whatever. So his background was his backyard was a basketball court, and he had 9 courts. Every day after school, he'd come home. His dad had the key, so whenever that stadium closed, Andrew could always go in there and get up shots and shoot basketball and play. So from a young age, from 5 years old, he had a ball in his hand. The fact that he was always the first at training and the last to leave. I know that's a cliche when you talk about great players. He's the first guy there. Andrew was literally the first guy in the gym and always the last guy to leave. And I think his dad, and the best thing about Lindsay was Lindsay always gave us freedom. But imagine being the son. So he's definitely going to give him freedom. Andrew learned along the way that he could be good if he just worked hard. And he spent all of his time, his extra time in basketball. After training, we'd get up 500 shots. The most competitive guy I've ever seen outside of me. So he definitely made me better, because if Andrew scored 30 points, I needed 31 because I thought I was good. But, I was smart enough to realize Andrew's the Michael Jordan of Australia. He's the GOAT here. Yeah. I can't come in and take his spot. What I can do is stand beside him and help him to win a championship or two. And sort of once we learned that, once he realized I wasn't a threat, because I talk more trash than anybody you ever see. I thought I was good. I can make this shot from here. I can do this. I can do that. And he was the same. He's a nice guy and people don't know him. But Andrew's still very arrogant when it comes to basketball. And so he should be arrogant about his ability. Yeah. Let me just say that. He didn't brag about it, but you know how good he was. And again, he pushed me. When you asked me that question before, how did I get better? He pushed me, because watching him whenever training was over, he'd go to the next court and get up his shots. When everybody else is packing up stuff, going to the locker room to shower and leave, Andrew's getting in 500. And so I just said, look, man, I got to start working out. I got to start getting these shots up with him because he's so good. It just looks natural to him. I got to start doing the same thing. And every Wednesday and Friday, we'd have our little routine where Al Westover would rebound and we'd get up our shots, and we just made each other better. We did.
Fantastic. Love that insight. It's funny how you talk about being a loudmouth and, brash on the court. I did some reading, actually, doing some research on NBL imports, hoping I'd pick up something on you before this interview. And Pete Hansen, who used to play for the Wildcats, big American center, he was asked to give a one-word answer about a range of different players from the NBL in the 90s. And when he was asked for a one-word response to Lanard Copeland, his response was, obnoxious.
That's good. That's what I'm supposed to be if I'm the opposition. I should be obnoxious. If I'm the opposition, I'm trying to worry you out your game, bro. But you got to understand something. Understand where I got it from. Charles Barkley was the number one. No, I can't say number one. I'm going to say Larry Bird was the number one trash talker. Charles Barkley was number two in the NBA when I was coming in. So if I'm with Charles every day and I'm hearing Charles do his thing and it's working for him, then I'm learning. Again, I didn't have the experience that everyone else had. I picked up all this stuff from these guys. And look, I can admit now that I talked a lot of trash, but I had to be good enough to back it up. And so I was smart enough to realize I got to get in here in this gym and do the extra work. I can't tell a guy I'm going to make this shot when I'm not making it. I look like an idiot. So I got to get in here and do this extra work. And in a way, it made me more confident in my game and more confident in our team.
You certainly did back it up. None more so than the 1997 NBL season when you win a second championship and you have that incredible final series to the point where you're named Grand Final MVP. It's a Melbourne Derby Grand Final series with the Magic. I mean, just incredible hype around Victoria. Mark Bradkey goes to another level. Gaze is Gaze, of course. Was that as dominant as you ever were on a personal level, though, Lanard?
I think Marcus Timmons probably deserved it just as much as I did. Marcus Timmons was an all-arounder. When they say he rebounded the ball, he played defense, he shot well, he did whatever he had to do to help us get that win. Now, luckily enough, I was on fire and I made some jump shots down the stretch and hit some big threes, and I had a good series. But Marcus got us to that next level. I mean, but the biggest thing I remember about that series was the hype. The newspaper, Channel 10, you know, the just all the hype before the game. Like, we'd go to both teams playing at Rod Laver Arena, both our home courts, and we'd go to train there, and it'd be new Channel 10, Channel 9, Channel 7, SBS, all there. So it was like being a rock star, I swear. So those were the people talk about basketball today. Those were the best days.
Oh, yeah.
Of our lives back then, because basketball was huge. And you talk about other imports and other players. Players were so recognized back then. If I went to Perth, someone would know me. If Ricky Grace came to Melbourne, someone would know him. If D-Mac went to Canberra, someone would know him. Because we were all on free-to-air television and they promoted the game so well back then, it didn't matter where you were, someone would recognize you as a basketball player. So those were the great days for me. Yeah. Undoubtedly.
But you do leave Melbourne not long after that. So you played there for a long period of time, but then you went to Brisbane and Adelaide. Did it hurt when you left the Tigers? Were you comfortable with the decision? How did that all manufacture itself?
Andrew and Lindsay were leaving. Mark Bradkey was leaving. And the Tigers had some pretty good players that sat on that bench for a long time. Now, I can say that now. Probably, me and Andrew probably played a year too long, to be honest. You know, they had Dave Thomas and they had Rashad Tucker and D-Mac and there were guys there that as you seen, as soon as we left, they won championship. So those Darryl Coletto, those guys were ready to go. And when Jay-Z and Lindsay called it quits, I wasn't ready to retire. Again, I didn't start when I was 5 years old. You know, I started when I was 19, so I still had some basketball in my legs. And luckily enough, I got a contract in Brisbane. Now, I was right around the age of 40, turning 39, 40, going into Brisbane. And we had Joey Wright was a coach. And Joey's one of those old school college coaches that will run your pants off. Now, at my level, I've done a lot of running. I probably the wrong pick for me and probably the wrong pick for them. So I ended up staying 1 year. I had success. I played well. I think I scored my 10,000th point in Brisbane, you know, and but the work ethic for me, I could tell I was slowing down because Joey had 3 a days. Now, that's unheard of for basketball unless you got a lot of young kids. So Joy would have Adam Gibson and Mick Hill and all these young guys come in at 7:30 in the morning. And then at 10, we'd have regular training. And then at 5, we'd have another training. At 39 years old, bro, you can't get water from a rock. So after that first year, I went in and said, Joey, listen, I respect you as a coach. You know, we're good friends, but I think I'm done. And sort of walked out. We shook hands. Everything was cool. But then I get a call from Phil Smythe, who said, listen, I think you still can play.
Yep.
You know, you're turning 40. I'm not gonna burn you out. You'll train once a week with the team, so you know the plays. The other time you come in and get shots, you ride a bike. He said, remember, I played when I was older. I know what it's like. He said, come in for 1 year, see how you like it. And fortunately enough, I had enough respect for Phil. I said, okay, I'll give it one more shot. I went to Adelaide and did quite well. And then I ended up playing another year because of the routine. I mean, if I'm not burning my legs out in training, then I could play on the weekend. And that's how it was. You know, I finished my 2 years in Adelaide and retired. But, you know, overall, my Australian career was fantastic. You know, you can't go overseas. You can't ask for anything more. Yeah. I mean, if I played at home in America in the NBA, you'd be happy to be in the NBA. But if you got to go overseas to finish the way I finished and to win championships and you know, have your jersey retired and become a Hall of Famer, then you can't ask for much more. And more importantly than anything else, to gain the lifelong friends that I have here. I got 4 daughters here, and you know, safe country. I'm happy that I made the decision.
We're delighted that you made the decision because you gave us so much joy, and to hear you recount it all now is wonderful. A few quick questions to finish on, Lanard. Australian basketball now, where's it at for you? I mean, so many great players overseas. The league was picking up. Now COVID's obviously affected it a bit. Where's the game at for you, taking everything into account, grassroots to the top?
I think grassroots has always been in a fantastic position. If you go to any stadium on a Saturday morning or a Friday night in Melbourne, then you can't find a parking spot and you can't walk in because they're packed. And it's always been that way since I've been here, and even now it's packed. There was a time in 2000s when the NBL took their foot off the pedal, off the gas. We stopped promoting. We stopped going to schools. We stopped going to the shopping centers. There was no TV deal, and so we lost fans. We lost it. Luckily enough, Larry comes in and saves the league, and he has done a fantastic job at getting it where it is today. I mean, and it's in a great position. I still would love to see another couple of teams in the league, and I'd love to see a TV deal on free to air.
Yeah.
Once you get those two, with the talent that comes through Australia, the talent here in Australia, with the population being what it is, the amount of talent you get as a basketball player in Australia is unheard of. And then with the imports, the ex-NBA guys and guys coming to play in Australia, this league is right behind the NBA. I mean, it's right behind the NBA. So the only difference is the money. I mean, but if you can get a TV deal, put another couple of teams in this league, basketball is in a good place, very good place.
Most certainly, and it seems the closest it's been to those days of the 90s when you were flourishing along with so many others. The problem, I guess, now is, like when I was growing up watching in the NBL in the 90s, right, you had no other sports competing. So I watched the NBL and the AFL, basically. Now you've seen, you know, soccer get its act together, that's on TV, rugby union, for example. But now you've got access to all the international sports. I couldn't watch the NBA when I was a kid, right? It just wasn't on TV. Now you can watch every game of the NBA, every game of the Premier League, every game of the NFL. So it's very hard to get that media space, isn't it, for the NBL right now? I mean, that's the big challenge.
Yes, absolutely. And again, back then, though, I tell people this all the time. When Michael Jordan was playing, I don't care what sport was on. If you're a soccer player, if you're a cricketer, you're going to watch Michael Jordan in the playoffs do his thing. So Michael carried the game for us back then. All right. Right now, the face of the NBA is LeBron, and people Some people love him and some people don't.
Yeah.
Back then when Jordan played, I think everyone loved him. I mean, you can say what you want to say. Jordan was Jordan, okay? If you didn't love him, you knew about him. You talked about him. You know, so I think now, though, you're right. There's a lot of sports to choose from. There's a lot of things going on. Again, I say add a couple of more teams, get these cities involved. There needs to be a team in Canberra. Probably needs to be another team in Sydney somewhere. You know, it'd be great if Perth. I know Perth would love to have their one team, but if you can add a couple more teams and get on free to air, you get on Channel 7 on a Thursday night or a Wednesday afternoon when people aren't watching another sport, then it sort of picks that, you know, it picks that viewer participation up, and then the league's back where it needs to be.
Most certainly. All right. So you've answered the LeBron Jordan debate. I did have that question down, but that's not even, you know, you've answered that a long time ago. You saw Jordan firsthand, and that's done. He's the GOAT for you, and that makes sense. Best player you ever played with? Now, you played with Barkley, but you played a lot of your time with Andrew Gaze. So when you answer that question, best player you ever played with, how do you weigh it up? Best player I ever played with in America, I'll do it a different way. Best player I ever played with in America is probably, it has to be Charles Barkley. Best player I've ever played with in Australia is Andrew Gaze, bar none. I mean, I played with some talent, but Andrew, with his work ethic and the way he went at his basketball business, he was a guy who's not athletic, who's not going to dunk on you, who's not going to forcefully grab any rebounds, but every night he'd end up with 30 points. You could write his 30 points on the paper before the game started. So, those two guys, for me, probably best two guys I ever played with, yeah. He was remarkable. Best player you ever played against? Best player I've ever played against would be people probably in America, because I came in and I had to train against Hershey Hawkins. He was so skilled at coming off screens and using screens and getting open. And I was just learning the game, but he would run me through circles every day in training. I don't know how in the hell I stayed there the whole year, because Hershey Hawkins, and I learned so much from him because he was very quiet, never spoke, shot the ball extremely well. I'd have to say Hershey Hawkins my early days, because I had to guard him every day in training. Mm-hmm. And here, again, guys like Ricky and Derek Rucker and Robert Rose. You can't put them. You can't name one guy, because I remember Andrew was doing a lot of scoring, but I had to guard all these little quick guys every single game. So to guard Derek, who was averaging 30, and then Ricky, who was going to get his, and then Robert Rose, who was going to get his. You know, it was tough, man. It was tough. And then I had to try to score on the other end, so I had to play both ends of the floor. So I put all those guys in the same. Dwayne McClain, I put all those guys in the same category. Australia has had some big-time superstars come through. Yeah. And fortunately enough, the fans who love basketball have had some great stars to watch. And they were a joy to watch, and you were chief among them as well. So best coach, is Lindsay the best coach you've ever had, or was there someone else who had more of an impact as you came through? Lindsay was the best coach because he did all of his work in training. He would swear and rant and spit and yell and point that big finger at you. And but if you ever notice Lindsay in a game, he'd always sit here and have his hands behind his head. And he'd always say, fellas, this is your game. I'm here. I'm a spectator. I want to watch just like everybody in the stands. So he let you learn the game. He let you play, and you had that freedom to experiment and do what you wanted to do. So by far, he was my best coach. By far. Brilliant story. Lanard, it's been awesome listening to you. It really has. I mean, just a wonderful sporting tale. And I'm sure people have been enthralled. You gave us so much joy when you played, and to hear you all put it all together from where it started to today is just fantastic. So thanks so much. Great to see you looking so well and so enthusiastic about your wonderful career. And just thanks so much for telling it all with such candor for us. Daniel, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I tell this same story. I've probably told this story 500 times. I know people have probably
probably don't want to hear it, but it is what it is. You asked me on, so I'm happy to be here, and good luck with the podcast, and I hope everything goes well. And hopefully we'll stay in touch and speak soon.
Let's hope so. Lanard Copeland, thanks so much.
Thanks, Danny.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.